Say welcome to all of you ladies joining us here on this Friday almost evening, at least here in the Midwest. And we are excited to share what has been happening with women in leadership in our team. Joining me are Rose Sweatman. And Rose, you just want to say where you're from and kind of what you do there?
Yes, I am in Seattle, Washington, and I am the regional leader for Vineyard USA Northwest region.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And Kathy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Maskell. I'm the pastor of discipleship at Blue Root Vineyard, which is just outside of Philly in Pennsylvania. And I also lead the Vineyard Justice Network for Vineyard USA.
And Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon McCarter. I'm from Maryville, Tennessee, which is close to Knoxville, Tennessee. And I am an associate pastor, actually transitioning into being the campus pastor at our main campus right now.
Oh, that I didn't know that, Sharon.
It's always changing.
And I'm Diane Lehman, and I'm a senior leader here at the Vineyard of Champaign-Urbana. Vineyard Central Illinois is what we call it, because we're a multi-campus church. And I have the privilege of leading the Women in Leadership Network for the Vineyard USA. And so I'm excited to share one of our main goals over the past few years has been to connect. We really want to connect with other Vineyard women leaders across the country. And we've tried a variety of things. We've tried big gatherings. We've tried small gatherings. We've tried newsletters. We've tried, and many good things have happened, but we're frustrated because we know so many of you, between caring for families or working other jobs, expenses, travel, it's been impossible to attend a geographic gathering. And so as we've discussed and put our brains together, we came up with, it's not a new idea, but online mentoring. And of course, with the technology nowadays, it's been a fabulous way where we can connect with women all over the country. And this has been so exciting because we have women in the Midwest connecting with women in the Pacific Northwest, or women in the South connecting with women in the East. And so we have been very pleased with what has happened this last 6 months. We have taken once a month for about 90 minutes, just once a month, and we've discussed different topics. And Rose, would you just share a minute what that looks like? And then I'm going to go ahead and have each of you tell a little bit about your own leadership journey, but just so our listeners know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Right. We started our first group. We had cohorts. Kathy and I did 2 groups, and Kathy did a group. And we started out the first month by just getting to know each other. We sent out some questions ahead of time for women to sort of reflect on and respond to. And it was more just tell us about yourself, where you are in life, your own sort of path to leadership. And then from then on, we went through topics. So soul care, women in leadership, justice issues. We had 5 different topics that, again, we would send out the questions ahead of time for women to sort of reflect on. And that would sort of facilitate our conversation when we would get online for the 90 minutes.
Good. Okay. And so what we're so excited about is we really felt these online mentoring times presented a safe environment to process real life dilemmas, questions, just conflicts. And hey, ladies, it has that not just accelerated in the last 6 months in our country, in our culture. You know, there's so much happening there, and the church is not exempt by any means. And so such a great arena for us to share our hearts, pray with each other, and even share resources. And so I'm excited for even where it's going to go, heading as we move into the next 6 months. But before we get into all the details on that, I wanted each gal here just to share a little bit about her leadership journey, because in the Vineyard, ladies, it wasn't always a given that we could lead. and from a senior position or a position of authority. And so we fought for that. We won the battle in 2006, but we still have a long way to go. So, Kathy, why don't you start? Just share a little bit about your leadership journey, and then we'll move to the other gals.
Yeah. So, I'm from San Diego, California, and I was raised Buddhist. And so I had like just no grid, like literally no grid for the church, much less church leadership or any desire to lead in the church. And that quickly changed because I came to faith right before college. And wouldn't you know it, the first church I ever started attending in my entire life was the Evanston Vineyard. And in my second year of college, Evanston Vineyard sent out Rand Tucker to plant the Hyde Park Vineyard in Southside Chicago. And for any of you who are on the call who are church planters or are considering church planting, well, let me just underscore how incredible of an opportunity for discipleship church planting is. Because as a 19-year-old baby Christian, I think the church officially started in January, and probably by March, I was on the prayer team. I somehow was hosting a small group in my dorm. And my third year of college, I was invited to organize the Alpha course and Alpha retreat for our church because, hey, what better way to engage me and to get me to go to the class than by asking me to organize the class? So I don't even necessarily know if I was called a leader or anything, but looking back, those were absolutely leadership development opportunities for me that Rand was just super sneaky and super just astute in inviting me to participate and belong and give me, I don't know if they were appropriate in terms of my maturity, but certainly it was appropriate in terms of giving me a sense of ownership for this endeavor of building a community. And I was hooked. So after that experience, I mean, in particular, I was really drawn to prayer ministry and was asked to lead prayer ministry at a couple of other Vineyard churches on the East Coast because I moved there after college. And one place that, just some people that were particularly helpful as I was continuing to grow spiritually, as well as just getting a sense of maybe being called a leader. I can think of just Jamie and Michelle Wilson, who are pastors of Coast Vineyard, Ellie Mumford, who kind of just helps with coordinating Vineyard International, LaQ Heidkamp, who's a pastor in Minneapolis. There's just some other women along the way who started, I don't think they ever called themselves mentors officially, but just relationally. And again, just kind of calling things out of me, noticing, challenging, asking the right kinds of questions that were just really helpful in helping me to take myself seriously. And so when we sensed a call to church plant in New Haven, Connecticut in 2007, all of those kind of lessons along the way really helped our team to feel confident enough to try something different. So we planted as two couples. So it was me and my husband, Caleb, and Matt and Hannah Crosman. And that's not exactly the Vineyard way, as we understood it in 2007. And so we needed a lot of encouragement, and we were looking for support as well as discerning. We didn't want to be rebellious, but we also had a sense that we wanted to do it a little bit differently. And so I'm really grateful for just other voices like Mike Turgiano and Phil Strout and John Reichart, who are, just East Coast pastors that just helped us to discern that, okay, maybe it's a little different, but there's some space in the Vineyard to do things differently. So that's just a little snapshot up to 2007, at least, in terms of just discerning those really formative steps into senior leadership.
That's outstanding, Kathy. I mean, I think if so many lessons right there that all of us can even just grab onto. You kept saying yes, people kept offering, and I'm always thankful for whether it's men or other women who invite us, and you kept saying yes. It doesn't matter how lowly it was or how unqualified you felt.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you. And that's an awesome lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've had such a variety of experiences, and you've lived in a lot of different places, and I know personally you've navigated some really tough situations, which, will come out as you mentor other people, as you share those. So thank you. That was very, very helpful. So let's go to Sharon. You want to share a little bit of your leadership journey?
Sure. I had kind of a radical call to ministry the summer before my senior year of high school. And it definitely changed the trajectory of my life. I looked up to my youth pastor like crazy, and I was on a mission trip, and the Lord just spoke to me that I was going to be a youth pastor. And I could not wait to tell my mentor that I was going to be a youth pastor. And he immediately said, "Oh, you can't, you're a girl." And that was my first, okay. And what was so good is I never doubted the Lord. My eyes were sort of open to the world in that moment. I was like, I knew I heard from the Lord. And, but it was so good because I went back, and it was just like ministry was just coming out of everywhere. And so I had the decision, am I going to stay in this youth group with this youth pastor? And I just knew I was supposed to, because that was the youth group reaching my friends. And shortly after that, I became the president of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I started preaching for the first time to my peers. My parents were involved in a church plant, a Methodist church plant, and that pastor came to me and asked me to be a youth pastor as a senior in high school. And so my Sundays when I was 17, I would go lead a middle school youth group from 5 to 7 o'clock. And then I would go to my youth group from 7 to 9 o'clock. And that's just, so it's like the second God called me, I just started preaching and teaching and leading and kind of never looked back. I went to Christian college, which was not the plan. But I felt like he was saying, go now. And at college, I was in a youth leaders association group. And so we took on the boys and girls clubs as our own youth groups. And so all throughout college, we had youth groups we were in charge of. We went to them. And every summer I went home and interned with my youth pastor. So he ended up creating an internship program for me. He didn't know what to do with me because he was PCA. They don't believe in women in ministry, but he saw all this fruit. And so he started to intern. So I interned a paid internship every summer. And one summer he just gave me the middle school youth group, just things like that. It was, I remember the first time he had me preach, the first book he walked me through. And so he didn't know what to do with me, but he mentored me anyways. And, by the end, he said I had changed his mind about women in ministry. And, when I graduated college, he moved on, and that church called me to interview, and they hired me. And they just said, you just won't be the youth pastor, you'll be the youth director, but you'll have the same job description. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And so, but it was my dream job. I was so excited. I just thought, it doesn't matter what I'm called. This is what I'm called to do. And so that went really well. And of course I had weird things. I had a youth assistant who they hired me over him, but he was in seminary. So he was allowed to preach in the pulpit on Sunday mornings, but I was not. I was just the youth pastor in the other building. I mean, with just weird stuff. They don't know what to do with you. So it's a lot of just humility, like I'm just serving the Lord. And then Aaron and I got married, and Aaron is the one who found the Vineyard. And we were long distance. He was still in college, and he called, and we didn't know anyone was like us. We knew where we were theologically. But then when we found the Vineyard, Aaron called and he said, I found who we are, and I'm like, who are we? He's like, we're a Vineyard. And so we ended up getting married and all this stuff. And Aaron is the one who had always been called to plant a church. And I just thought, planning a church, like, that's crazy. You know, like, there's two of us, and then on one day there's a church. Like, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. But I was like, okay, you know, we're up for anything. And so the two of us, he felt called to be in his hometown and plant a church. So we moved to Maryville, Tennessee, his hometown. And my first thought was, well, at least we have a youth pastor, you know, because that's what I was called to do. I was a youth pastor, you know. Well, then, you know, you start planning a church and you realize it's the same stuff. They're just older, you know, it's just adults. And really we were like 25, so we're not really that much older. And so as we planted the church, we're, you know, it's all the same stuff, like leadership development and creating teams. And so we did all of that. And I was the youth pastor. And the one thing I thought I would never do was be a kids pastor. I was not a kids person. But when you plant a church, you realize really quickly you need a really good kids ministry. And we went through a couple, you know, volunteers, friends trying to do that. And I thought, man, this is not good. This is not working. And it was killing me because I was like, I think I'm supposed to do this. But part of me was just, I don't want the stereotypical, now I'm really a kids pastor, like pastor's wife person. You know, I was like, no, this is not me. But it was what we needed. And so I ended up taking on the kids ministry. And I did that for 9 years. I built a kids ministry. And while I was a youth pastor, you know, this is small church stuff. And so when we moved, we finally hired the right youth pastor. I was like, I can't have a relationship with everyone in this church. So, you know, we found a great youth pastor. He was phenomenal, but we couldn't find a good kids pastor for a long, long time. And so 9 years later, but I had built the kids ministry from, 10 kids and 2 volunteers to hundreds of kids, 100 volunteers. It was like such a fun leadership challenge. And so then after that, we found a great kids pastor. We're so excited. And then God started moving us to do venues. And I helped to get one started. And then another church it fell in our laps. It was a church that was shutting down. And they asked us, do you want to make this a venue? We're done in 3 weeks. So come and take it, or we're walking. And so I was like freshly available. And so I went, and I ended up being the campus pastor there for 1.5 years, walked that church through that transition, made it Vineyard. I mean, just crazy. And so last November, we finally found the pastor there. And then, so now I'm back at Maryville, our main campus. And now we've decided, you know, because now we're a multi-site church. And so now Aaron is more doing the overall leadership and the main teaching and preaching. And now I'm more of the campus pastor, like running the staff and running that site, which is just, I'm having a ball now. So what I've learned through all these things is I feel like I've done a lot. I've done kids ministry, youth ministry, associate pastor, campus pastor. And what I've learned is that it's all pretty much the same thing. Like, you preach the gospel, you build teams, you send people out, you raise people up. And so I just feel like we're just called to serve wherever we're needed. And I'm passionate about that, and not boxing ourselves in like, no, this is what I am. I'm like, I'm going to serve the Lord with whatever gifts he's given me, wherever he points me.
Awesome. Oh, and that does summarize it, Sharon. I mean, your whole story. Again, I love our stories because, you know, they're so helpful even now to pass on that wisdom, but you basically you just would do it. And, you know, I love how you said you knew what Jesus had called you to and said you were. And so you just did it. It didn't matter. Right. And I love how the Lord honored that, even through thick and thin. And really just, you didn't care about titles. You know, you didn't care that other people doubted. You didn't care they told you couldn't do things. You faithfully did it. Yeah. What an awesome lesson. I love it. Okay. And Rose.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm way older than them, so my story is a little long, but I'll start. I grew up Roman Catholic, Italian family, Mexican family, you know, half and half. So generations of Roman Catholicism. So I literally fell in love with Jesus as a very little girl in the Catholic Church. And so I wanted to be a nun because that's what you do when you're a Catholic. You know, the best way to serve Jesus with your life is to become a nun. Well, that didn't happen because I got married and had children. So in 1986, I found myself in a Vineyard church being sort of reawakened by the Spirit. And the pastors of the church were all men, but they believed that women could be leaders in the church. So I was I sort of grew up in my faith in that church where I led small groups. I taught Sunday school, like same thing, Sharon, like if there was a need, I was there. Like for me, I think I got some of my best preaching experience with little kids, because sharing the gospel with kids, you have to just make it so simple and understanding. So I think every good preacher should teach kids, really. And so start there. And same thing, did everything that there was to do in that church. Ended up leading some women's recovery groups, and then took over women's ministry. And then in 1990, that church blew to smithereens. The pastor had a moral failure, everything blew up, the church shut down. And there was about 30 of us that stayed together and recovered for a few years. And then I was part of a planting team. 5 of us planted a new Vineyard church in 1993. And by 1995, the pastor of that church wanted to ordain me. I mean, the church came to me and said, we want to set you in. We want to ordain you and set you in as the associate pastor, because that's what you're doing. And that's what we do in the Vineyard. We see what you're doing and go, oh, wow, you are doing this. So let's lay hands on you. But at the time, that was in 1995, there wasn't room at that point. In our region at the time, all of the pastors, my area leader, and the regional overseer did not believe that women could be ordained. They didn't think that was right. So I will always give Tri Robinson kudos, because he was our regional leader at the time. And when they wanted to ordain me, I said, well, I really do want Tri's blessing. And I had a relationship with Tri. So I went to Boise, spent 3 days with him, and we debated back and forth intensely about the scripture and theologically, And finally, at the end of the day, Tri said, Rose, as a regional leader, our churches are autonomous. If Jim wants to ordain you, I can bless that. I wouldn't do it in my church, but I can bless it. And so that's all I wanted, was his blessing. So I was ordained in 1995, but then I was quickly labeled as a woman with an agenda in our region. I felt very marginalized, because if you even tried to promote women, to encourage them to live into their giftings of leadership, you had an agenda. So we spent probably, 5 to 7 years discerning if we should even stay in the Vineyard. And we always felt like we were supposed to stay, because that's where our relationships were. It was our tribe. And so we just decided, you know what? Again, it doesn't matter if anybody ever recognizes me outside of my local church. That's what matters. That's where I function in this role. So if it's never recognized anywhere else, that's okay. We're going to just be obedient to the Lord, and stayed. Well, then in 2006, when the resolution was passed, the regional leader at the time, Dave, came to me and asked me to be the area leader for our area. And he said, and I want to make it really clear, I'm asking you, not you and your husband. And so Rich and I talked that over. And I mean, Rich has always been my biggest cheerleader, and he was fine with that. So became the area leader in 2006. And then in 2012, when the transition happened nationally, Phil asked me to be the regional leader. And so I said yes to that. And the thing I would say is, in all of my story, up until I met Di in 2006, when Bert Wagner commissioned Di and Cindy to lead the Women in Leadership Task Force, I would say up until then, I didn't have women role models or mentors. I didn't know any women that were leading churches. And so, or even like back then, we didn't have as much technology as we do now to even listen to podcasts. None of that was happening in the late 80s, early 90s. So my biggest mentor was Barbara Brown Taylor. Back then, Barbara Brown Taylor was publishing her sermons in book sets. And I have every single one of them. She was my preaching mentor. Here's how a woman does illustrations. You don't always have to have football illustrations or baseball. You could actually have birthing illustrations. So it was actually, that she was one of my biggest mentors until in 2006, when I met Di and Cindy. And then I felt like, oh my gosh, this is heaven, having women that have done this, that have gone before, or at least on the same trajectory. So that's kind of my story.
Oh, so again, for our listeners, I'm always so blessed by everyone's story and how much, like, we have things to give away. All of you have experience, you have wisdom, you have a shared compassion. And again, Rose, I know a lot more of your story that you're not sharing right now, where you understand how to navigate pain. You know how to navigate rejection and some of the really hard things that come with just leadership, not even being a female necessarily. But so I so appreciate that. I'm just going to share a minute about my journey, because I really want to get to more of a discussion about how Kathy and Rose led the last 6 months of mentoring groups. And then Sharon and I are on board to help with the next group, depending on how many people we get. And we're just eager to, again, share whatever in any way that we can be most helpful. So, but I, like so many of you, I was raised in the 60s. So, women either were nurses or teachers. And so and that's what I trained for. Actually, my goal was to be a college professor. I was working towards a PhD at the time at the University of Illinois, radically met Jesus, then had a, infertility crisis that caused me to meet the Holy Spirit. Life turned upside down. The next thing I know, the Bible study that my husband and I are leading in our home explodes. And we are planting a church, although we've never heard those terms in our life. And so I'm just grateful now. I look back on those years, but see the grace of God all over it. But from the beginning, my husband and I teamed together. We have radically different gifts. And I saw the value of his gifts. He saw the value of my gifts. And I am very passionate about team ministry, both men and women, women getting along, men getting along with one another. And so I've been able to watch that now in the 40 years that we've pastored here in Champaign. And in addition to many things that I'm passionate about, it's raising up other preachers, particularly women. And so we've done that locally, and now we're doing it again nationally with posting sermons. And I know, Rose, you did a whole mentoring focus on preaching. And again, we can go wherever we need to go with what the needs are, but many of us have passions and experiences that, we are waiting to share. And so in some ways, we're going to let some of you determine, like, well, this is what I need, this is what I want. But all that, I want to zoom in now on Rose. Do you want to just start, and then Kathy can jump in and we can go back and forth. Give us a description again of how you led the last 6 months of mentoring, and maybe some of your highlights or things that worked particularly well that could at least cause any of our listeners to say, I got to get in on this. Yeah.
Okay, and before I do that, I don't know if it's clear to our listeners that if they have questions, they can type it in the chat window. I don't know if they know that, but I saw the message come up, but if listeners are looking, there is a chat window. So at any time, if you have questions, you can type them and we'll see them. So, but yeah, I had two groups of very intergenerational. There were married women that were co-pastoring with their husband. There were single women that were leading venues or hubs or whatever we call them now, sites. Everybody has a different name for their sites now. So there was it was very diverse, and it was beautiful. And I loved that part of it. And I think in all of our sessions, we tried to even say, is there something that's happening for you right now that you want to bring to the group? And just run it by the group, whether it's like, we don't know how to go to the next level. Like, we had one woman in our church, because of all the racial tension that was going on in the country at the time. She actually was in the South and wanted the group's opinion about, how do you handle this from the pulpit? So we had those kinds of discussions that just came up for what was happening in women's lives, leadership challenges they were having. And then we were able to follow up the next month and celebrate with women, like when they brought things to, if they had to have a hard conversation with a staff person, like, I don't know really how to have this conversation. So we intermixed our topics, which we had set topics like justice, finding your calling, how did you hear your calling, vocation, soul care. So we would have all those discussions, and those were really well done too, because women were in different seasons of life. So women that had young children, the other women that maybe were down the road a little bit could even say, oh, when I had young children, this is what worked for me, or have you tried this, or I just thought it was so beautiful, because that's what happened. There was a connection and a relationship, and outside of our cohort, I know that women were connecting with each other to say, hey, can I just get like 10 minutes of your time you brought this up in the cohort, I'd really like to flesh that out with you, how you handled that. So it was good.
Good. You know, Rose, one of the questions that was entered in the chat room is, she said, are any of the speakers employed outside the church? But none of us are, but I think it's really important because some of your mentees were employed outside the church. And so that was a discussion I think either you, perhaps Kathy, could address, like you address the issue of balancing work life, church life. Is that correct?
Yeah, Kathy, you want to talk about that?
Actually, for me, we did have one person. It wasn't exactly working outside the church, but she was in seminary, and so she was interning at a local church. But that's not exactly like working in a traditional sense. So for you, Rose, you might be able to speak better. But I will say part of what was really just fun in our group, there was some diversity as well. So we had a seminarian who was interning in a church. You know, we had someone who was a pastor on staff, and her spouse was not in ministry, but, you know, worked just a full-time job. And then there was another person who was a co-pastor, and she was part-time and part-time, you know, taking care of mom in the home. And so there was variety in that way. And we definitely talked about work-life balance, whether or not you're working mostly in the church or outside, but church work is it's definitely, it feels like work. And I would say the dynamics in how we talked about were very similar, as if, you know, someone worked full time, you know, in a tech company.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I did have women in my cohort that were bivocational. And so we did talk about the work-life balance. Like, how do you do ministry? How do you care for a family when you also are working outside? So we did have those conversations.
Okay, good. I see Lori asked, can you address the issue of working in coordination with other staff? I'm not quite sure. Lori, I'm not sure if you mean, do we address that in the mentorship? We have a whole session on men and women working together. But Rose or Kathy, did you want to address that?
I will say, and you mentioned this at the beginning, Di, in terms of one of the greatest benefits of joining in on an opportunity like this of a mentoring group is just both the beauty of the safety and freedom that comes from participating in a trans local mentoring group. And so for us, it pretty much happened every month, you know, because of no matter what the topic, it invariably kind of led to like, well, how have others tried to handle this? Or I'm in a situation that involves, whether it be another staff person, or it could just be another leader in the church or another family in the church. And to have the safety of, hey, I get to process and talk about this with people who are not within my immediate bubble, just gave people real freedom to be vulnerable and honest. I mean, not gossiping, but actually like, hey, this is really what's happening. I don't feel that my thoughts are as fully formed as I'd love them to be. Could I try this out? And that was, I would say, one of the highlights and real ways that we were able to support one another. Because we had someone from the East Coast, someone from the South, someone from the West Coast, like literally. And there's like, what are the chances that those folks would ever be in the same room? I mean, and how would they find each other, even if they went to a national conference? And that was just, a huge benefit.
Rose, do you have anything else you want to say just about your experience? And we have a couple more questions we could go to, but just the dynamic of the 90 minutes, the fact that you sent out information ahead of time. So people, you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the questions, I tried to send my questions out like 3 weeks ahead of time so that people, and we actually in some of it, we gave them a little homework to do if they could. And so it better prepared them to come online and actually have a discussion. Since we only had 90 minutes, the more prepared we were to have the discussion, I think worked really well. And we would just go almost like around the room and just have people answer the questions and take a pause if somebody said, wait, I have a question about what you just said. And so it was very relational, conversational. I think especially, I remember the one on men and women working together. There was a couple of younger women in our cohort that had never really heard that women could be senior pastors. Like it was news to them, even being part of our cohort. Like, I think my pastor is like for that, but my family would say that's not right. Like, so there were some younger women. I actually got some notes from a couple of the younger women that were part of the cohort to say, I learned so much from this. Like it opened my eyes to so much. My head is kind of swimming right now. And the same thing actually happened with the justice one as we began to dig into what does biblical justice mean, especially because the nation is just so polarized. Everything is so divisive. It's like, but what does the Bible say about these issues? And that was a huge conversation. Like we didn't even really want to end that conversation. That was the one where there were women that lived, in parts of the country where it was really hitting hard. Like, we don't even know what to do from the pulpit. I mean, we have to address this. Like, so I remember there was one woman, I think they were that week that we had that topic in the South, they were, I think they were opening the Civil Rights Museum or something. Mm-hmm. And there was something like that happening on a national level. And so one woman said, we have to address this in our from the pulpit because it's happening. We can't ignore this. And so everybody sort of like gave sort of input of how they would hear what they were thinking about saying. So it was super helpful. I loved that the best. Like the questions and the topics were great, but it actually was a launch pad into what women were actually dealing with in their day-to-day ministry lives.
Yeah.
That's good.
And just to add quickly in terms of some of the structures of communications for my group, I set up a Slack channel, which is basically a like messaging piece of software. And it was just a way that we actually were praying for each other in between the calls, as well as sharing resources. So if there was a sermon or or a Vineyard resource that pertained especially to the topic, or an article, I would just send that along, and others would send it to each other as well. And that just worked really nicely, and just building that sense of community and support, certainly beyond the call. And my call was actually 120 minutes. So I'm just like, well, okay, I hope that was okay. But we certainly knew how to fill the time.
What I really hope our listeners are getting a picture of is we wanted to be very intentional about topics, intentional about preparation, and then definitely leave it open for the Holy Spirit to bring it together, expand, focus, however he wanted. But we do have a fee of $125, and we do that, and that's given to the leader. So whether that be Sharon or Kathy or Rose or myself, And that is just to number one, when we pay for something, we get more serious about it. And of course, that's what Vineyard Coaching also does. And so we wanted it to be something worth your while. And so we wanted to put more time into it, more effort, and communicate that it isn't just, oh, once a month we hop on and have a chat. It is that, but it's so much more than that. And I know from our feedback from the gals who participated in the last groups, I think we had 17, overwhelmingly appreciated the fact that preparation, we gave thought, it was organized. And because, we women, we can get off topic pretty quickly. And I love the fact that, we kept it organized. Now, a couple more questions have come in. First of all, is this a pastor-to-pastor mentoring program, or are other ministry leaders involved in the mentoring program? And so all of us here are pastors. We're not all like the senior pastor of a church, but we're pastors. But you don't have to be a pastor per se to participate as a mentee. You will have to fill out the application. I think Kathy sent the link there in the chat room. And that helps us discern, like, what areas of leadership are you pursuing? Do you feel called to? It helps us, rather than just having a random, group. It's primarily we're trying to focus in on women who sense a call in the arena of leadership. Does anybody else want to address that? Am I making that clear? Or,
Yeah, I think that's good, because we've all kind of know, Rose was saying, I was saying, Kathy was saying, we've all worn so many hats.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think we can speak into that. Even when you're the senior pastors are always talking about, how can I make kids better, youth better, my prayer team better, so it's all ministry. And so I think we can, speak into that and help each other all the time.
Yeah. Good. The next question was, will the topics of discussion be the same this cohort as the last one? Mm-hmm. And Rose or Kathy, do you want to address that? Or you want me to?
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
Rose, do you want to take a stab at it?
What we have discussed is for incoming new cohorts, if you haven't been a part of a cohort before, we would go over the same topics. And for those that are returning, if they wanted to stay in a cohort, even if they have a different lead, so for instance, the women that were with me, maybe next time they might be with Kathy or Di or Sharon. It doesn't necessarily mean you have the same lead, but what we were thinking with the returnees, if they wanted to be together for round 2, we would invite them to help us discern what topics would they want to discuss. What would be helpful for them. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we will have the same set of topics for new people coming on. But if you want to return as a mentee, we won't repeat those, but instead we are going to pick your brain and say, okay, what is it that you are interested in? And then we'll embark upon preparation for those topics. Yeah. Is that clear? Yeah.
And for those returning and wanting to have, just a second round of mentoring, when you fill out the application, there's already some suggestions for perhaps the kinds of topics that you might want to focus in on. So just from what I remember from the applications, maybe you want to focus on preaching, or maybe you want to focus on more like these issues of justice. Mm-hmm. And then there should also be space, if you are returning, to just write in your own ideas in the application itself.
Yes. Yes. From Andrea, she wonders, is there a place for women ministering in other countries? As far as I'm concerned, of course, we would welcome, women who are ministering in other countries. Your needs would be similar in some ways, but different. I think you could add a lot to our discussions, but I don't see that as a restriction. Any other thoughts from any of the other panelists?
Rose, you had a couple of people from other countries in one of your groups, I thought.
Did I? I don't think so.
Okay.
Oh, Canada. Yes. I had somebody from Canada, but that was it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only thing I would see is if there was a language barrier, but other than that, I couldn't see there being any challenges. I think it could really add a lot.
Yeah. Yes. I think that'd be very fascinating because, what is happening with women around the world in ministry and in those, geographic locations, whether they're third world or otherwise, I think is very fascinating to share our hearts about that. So I think that would be fine.
One thing I would also add in terms of the style or the culture of these mentoring groups is that each of us, although you heard a little bit of each of our leadership stories, and certainly we've got experiences of all kinds, and so I totally want to own that there is a certain level of expertise that is represented with any and all of the mentors. At the same time, like the approach that we're taking with mentoring is about us speaking into one another's lives. So these calls are not like lectures on the topics.
Good.
It's very much the mentor acting more as a facilitator, while of course we're going to share our stories and our perspectives, but don't expect to join a call where it's like Rose is going to tell me everything. It's Rose is going to say some things, and you're going to be an active participant and share your story, which is it will help somebody else, or even your questions are going to help somebody else.
Yes, that's good. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I don't see any that have been typed in, but feel free to do that.
I see a couple. So
okay, go ahead.
There's one that's clarifying that says Vineyard coaches don't have a fee. Multiply Vineyard coaches are volunteers. Oh, okay.
Oh, well, for example, I had to pay for coaching from the Vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to pay a fee. So I'm not sure.
I think it depends on what kind of coaching you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah. So
they're provided for free for some, I think, for church planting. And anyway, yeah, I think it just depends. And then the other question I see is, how big is each group?
Mm-hmm. You want to address that, Rose? And
I had two groups. One group was 7 women and one group was 8 women. And so, but Kathy's was 3.
My group was small. It was like 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we will let them get bigger than 6 or 7 though.
Yeah.
That was the max for me, I think, in each cohort, in order to have the conversations we wanted to have in 2 hours. My sessions were also 2 hours. So
sorry, Di.
And generally, I think you gals, you did it. You used this format, didn't you? The Zoom format, or did you use another format? Zoom.
Yep. We use Zoom. Mm-hmm.
Zoom. So, Sharon, is that basically what you've used just in other communication? Or have you guys found something that works better?
No, yeah, Zoom seems to be the one that works the most. I feel like everyone in the Vineyard uses Zoom.
Yeah. I know we've tried a couple other things like Microsoft Teams and a couple of things, but we pretty much come back to Zoom. So go ahead.
What's nice about Zoom is it gives people flexibility to call in with their cell phone if they need to join in and they're in the car, getting somewhere. So you do not have to be sitting in front of a computer in order to participate in the coaching call. I mean, that would be ideal, so we can see each other, but it's not a requirement.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's good.
So just to clarify where we're heading, technically the deadline for signing up for the next groups is Monday, February 26th. We might ask Katie, she is our admin, if that could possibly be extended a little bit. We're going to see just how much response we get even from today. But you go to the address, the website that Kathy posted there. It's on our vineyardwomen.com website, and click under mentoring, and there it is. Look at the application, read all of the details, and then the groups, again, will be organized, several ways. Prominently, first of all, whether you're a returnee or not, that will make a difference. But secondly, just the time of day. And again, because we're coordinating across the country, maybe Kathy will do a group at 5 o'clock Eastern time on a Thursday night. But, Mountain time, that's a couple hours different. So that might work for that person. Anyway, we let Katie sort all that out and coordinate the times. But we let you, of course, say what are the best times for you. And we try to match that up. And any other details there, ladies, as far as just the admin?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
There's one, let's see, Jennifer said, when will we hear when our applications have been approved?
Let's see, Katie, can you address that? I know you're listening in, but I hope she's there.
So we will extend the deadline then. We'll extend the deadline to the end of next week. And then usually it just takes a couple of days to go through and match up groups. And we don't, at least in the past, we haven't necessarily didn't approve anyone, but it's a matter of just finding the right group for each person.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah. It's not like, did you get in or not get in? Like, how? No, we want to accommodate everyone and as much as possible. So yeah, it's just a matter of, and I was checking with Katie because she does all our admin, and it's a matter of just her getting the info and then, making sure she can organize all the groups. Mm-hmm.
And the application questions are really to help the mentor to get an understanding of your context and where you're coming from.
Yes.
Not whether or not you're good enough to
No.
be mentored or not.
Not at all. Yeah. But if you have any other questions, we have just a few minutes. Feel free to type them in, or even if you have suggestions for us. Our first run at this was sort of a pilot program, and we were just very pleasantly surprised at how it went. And we are very excited that this could gain more momentum in the vineyard. It'd really be a way for us to connect. And go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, maybe Di, if you can remember off the top of your head, or I don't know if Katie could chime in here, but I think maybe folks would appreciate just hearing like some of the just highlights of the kinds of feedback, like what did people say in terms of how they just really benefited from the mentoring group. And then I think maybe you could highlight the National Women's Conference that's coming up and how we hope to do a meetup there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katie, do you have that available? Just off the top of your head? I know I read some. Oh, hi there, Malachi.
Hi, sorry.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, I think people said they were surprised and they enjoyed the groups more than they initially expected. A lot of people appreciated the different diversity we had in the topics. And a lot of people, I think, were surprised, as Kathy shared, like that it is much more like people in the group contributing and chiming in and helping one another, not so much one person teaching, pouring out all their wisdom to others. And so our hope is that you increase relationships also with each other coming out of this. And so,
Tracy says, I would love a session on the topic of transitions. So we'll make a note of that. That's something I can address because I'm in the middle of transition. And I see Leslie agrees with that. And then how long do the groups last? It's 6 months. Yvette, you're asking, is it 6 weeks? No, it's 6 months. So the next group will start in March sometime and then run through the summer. So March, April, May, June, July, August.
One time a month. Yeah.
One time a month. Yeah. Thanks, Rose. Yeah.
Mhm.
And as far as the upcoming women's conference, let me just quick share about this. It's just been posted both on our Facebook page and our website, again, vineyardwomen.com. This is going to be in Columbus, Ohio, and it's hosted, by Marlene Nathan and her team, and she's welcomed the Women in Leadership team to lead with this. It's primarily some of us older ones who've been around for a while and really wanting to ignite just the passion in the hearts of the younger women. So we're just excited. It's going to be an awesome gathering of women from really all over. Eleanor Mumford is coming from England, and all of our team will be there. We'll be sharing. There'll be workshops, lots of prayer, ministry, awesome worship. And that is May 2nd, Wednesday night, through May 4th, Friday night. And Rose, you want to share about, we're planning a little get-together of anyone who's already been through the mentoring.
Yeah, anyone that is going to be at the conference in May that has been a part of the mentoring, the first round, Diane, Kathy, and I want to have a meetup with you. And so I sent an email out to that group to just say, let me know, and then we'll be in touch with how we're going to do a meetup. But we would like to just have some in-person time with all of the women that have so far gone through the first round.
Yeah. So again, we'd love to meet people actually face to face, not screen to screen. So, and we're hoping, again, that was one of our goals as the mentoring gained momentum and we had a better feel that even some of our budget, the Women in Leadership budget, which isn't huge, but we could possibly use that to have a face-to-face gathering at the culmination of the mentoring time. And so we just decided to take advantage of a conference that's already been planned and say, come if you can, and we'll definitely make a time to connect. Yeah.
And one last resource that I will add to the chat window here. If you are a woman leader of color, so you do not have to be paid staff, but if you are a woman of color and you are a worship leader, you're a small group leader, you're children's ministry teacher, obviously if you're on staff, but we actually have separate funds because another priority of the Vineyard is diversity. And so we really want to help pastors to get their leaders of color to events that, just have some cost because it's translocal. So I'm going to chat that link as well. So you can apply for yourself, or if you're a pastor on this call, you could apply on behalf of someone in your church as well.
Hey, Sharon, thank you, Kath. That was good. Sharon, will you share just a quick minute or so about upcoming CauseCon?
Sure, yeah. The CauseCon it's going to be in Kansas City, and let me look up the dates. It's April 12th, 13, and 14. And it is a conference rally, about people trying to, figure out what they're going to do in this world and how they're going to change it for, the sake of Jesus, and so it's mostly young people. A lot of people will go to this conference, and I think a lot of people just like bring sleeping bags and sleep in this church and all. But for moms, it's really important. I think it's amazing. They have childcare available for moms that can go, and so you'll hear from good speakers. There's lots of breakouts. The Women in Leadership team is doing like a signature workshop talking about a lot of the theology. A lot of our practice for women in leadership. And it was incredible. We had some powerful worship time, powerful prayer time, a lot of young people not knowing that they could be in ministry, as far as the women go, or just a lot of young people answering the call to ministry, or just really hearing clarity on maybe what's next for them. So it's a really, really well done conference that's coming up in April, and you can go, it's causecon.com. You can go to that.
Thank you. Yes, and you'll be there, and
Yep.
I think Kathy's going to be there, so it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I see it's 5 o'clock Central Time, and 6 o'clock for some of you, 7 o'clock for some of you. And so we're going to close this out, but I want to thank everybody for joining us, and it is recorded, so we're going to post it. You could share it with those who could not join us today, and pass on all of our good links here that Kathy is so adept at posting for us, which is awesome. And we are very excited, and I hope we get to connect with some of you soon. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Di.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
And
You
thank
too.
you.
Enjoy.
Okay.